the Employment Equity Act got amended quite recently. It's still in process with the sectoral targets being out for public comment, and it changes the narrative in terms of the rules. So there are three very important things about it that we have to understand. The one is that they change the definition of what companies are applicable and has to comply. So you have what we call a designated employer, and they've changed that to be based on the turnover, not on the number of people that you have, not your revenue, etc., etc. So quite a large number of companies will now suddenly fall outside of that definition of a designated employer, which means that your smaller companies would be free to less legislation around them, but your larger companies would have to be more compliant. So that's a very important first step. The second step, which is really critical, is the fact that they've changed the compliance requirement. You now have to have a certificate that specifies that you are compliant, where before the Department of Labour would come to your company and say, we believe that you are not compliant, you need to do something about it. Now you need to submit your information, and then they decide whether you're compliant or not. That in itself brings a bit of a problem, because what if they don't like what you say? They can withhold your certificate, and by the legislation that have now been gazetted, then you can't do business with the government. So that's quite an important factor that we have to understand. There will be a big impact on business. And then the third one is this comes from and is aligned with the whole agenda around BEE. So the codes have been put in place to set a series of practices into the economy that says this is what you're supposed to do, and if you do it right, then you'll get recognition. The employment equity is a part of it, and they've basically taken it out of the codes and put it separate as legislation, effectively saying it's now time to meet the legislation. This is maybe more voluntary, this is no longer voluntary. And I think companies need to understand the impact that it'll have on them.